This is the fourth video of Introduction to IFS or Internal Family System as a Therapeutic Approach. And in this video, I want to focus on unburdening or exile work. Meaning we will continue the journey we started last time by looking at the 6 F's of working with protectors by going through the steps of working with exiles. And for this video, I also want to continue the example from last video, the session with the woman who came because of relationship problems and had the hothead part that was exploding and raging. And as we got to know the part and all the way towards the fears, it was really about the fears of the woman not being respected if it wasn't so explosive, the fear of people walking all over her and her feeling worthless again. And that is where we left off in the last session, because this worthless again was what pointed towards an exile. And before I start off the video, I want to just make a very short statement or remark. Now, if you read any IFS book, there is a very big emphasis on saying, feel free to try all the protector steps. Feel free to experiment with protectors, to try it out, because protectors are pretty stable and pretty solid. So even if you make mistakes, it'll be okay. The attitude towards just trying out to work with exiles is different. And it really makes sense to me to just have a short warning here, which is that these steps we'll be covering in this video are really about getting to know an exile, witnessing them, and learning about the burdens, the pain they're carrying. And that's very vulnerable and tender work. So I think these steps are good to know about and to have an overview, especially if you're thinking about learning IFS therapy or of finding an IFS therapist or coach. But I wouldn't recommend anybody try this by themselves and just go there and explore their own exiles. I think as you get to these vulnerable, tender, hurt parts, it's really helpful to have somebody with you who's oriented, who's done this before, and who is skilled in this. That's just really important for me to make clear before I want to give you an overview, because I think it's so helpful to have a concrete understanding of these steps of the process as well. So the first step in working with exiles is about accessing. So before we do anything with exiles, it's about getting access and getting a connection with them in a safe way, which amongst other things means in a way where the protectors are okay with you, with your clients, contacting and connecting with these exiles. So in this first step, it's really about making sure that protectors that have been present or that might be present but you don't even know about are okay with you going there, are allowing you to connect with this part. One of the ways you can do this is literally by asking it, is every part of you okay with going there right now? One way to talk to protectors about this can sometimes be, if protectors are like, no, don't go there, why would you? To talk about, what if this part didn't feel like this anymore? What if this exile didn't have to feel so worthless anymore? And to see if protectors are willing to allow you to connect with the exile. One really important learning here is don't push past protectors. If protectors don't want you to go to an exile, you don't go there. That's the basic attitude in IFS, because the experience has been that if you push past protectors, it usually doesn't end well. They will have a strong reaction, and that can really create problems in people's lives. So that's the first element of accessing safely. And the second one is making sure that the exile unblends. Especially when you're dealing with an exile that carries a lot of charge, it's important to have some separation between self and the exile so that the exile doesn't overwhelm the whole system, which usually also doesn't go so well with the protectors. So that's the second element of connecting with exiles safely, is making sure the protectors are okay with it and the exile unblends enough to safely connect with the exile. And to continue this example, for the step of accessing and connecting with the exile, to safely create a connection, the question that was asked was, once the part shared, it's worried that she will feel worthless again. She asked the part, is there another part that feels worthless? So asking the part if the fear of that feeling, that experience, if there is another part that feels like that. And in this case, the part said yes. And what she saw in that moment was a picture of a little girl that was hanging her head. And she saw that little girl that was hanging her head, and the immediate response was, oh, compassion. I feel so sorry for her. But before doing anything with that little girl, the important step was then to also ask, and is it okay for the hothead if we connect with that little girl? Just making sure that we don't go beyond the boundary, we don't cross that border in the sense that the part doesn't want to. But for this part, it was okay. It's okay to go there. It's a little bit worried and it wants us to go slow. But it's okay with going to that part. And that's that finding the access and having the okay from the protectors to go there. And after safely connecting with an exile, the next step is witnessing. And this is, again, a very, very important step. The step of witnessing is really about being with the exile, seeing it, hearing its story, learning about it. And this really goes right to the core need that exiles have that we talked about in the first video series, which was exiles want to be seen. So they want to be seen, and the best entity in the world to see an exile, to be with an exile, to be present, compassionately present with an exile, is self. So witnessing is really about inviting the part to share its story, its feelings, etc. One question that often works here is asking what the part wants you to know, sense, or feel. Because this opens the door pretty wide, because exiles communicate in different ways. Some tell stuff, others send feelings, others send pictures. And it's really about picking that up and witnessing it, seeing it, hearing it, feeling it. So is there anything the part wants you to know, sense, or feel about what it experienced? And this at its core, and I think this is a J. Early distinction, is about understanding what happened to the part and how did that make it feel. These can be two different things. It's about making sure you get what happened to the part. And sometimes what the part will show you is a very explicit memory. And then maybe you're like, oh yeah, I remember that, I get it, that was painful. But sometimes these things that the part may show are more symbolic. They can be kind of a lot of experiences put into one. An example could be, it's like I was invisible. And that's a symbol. And that symbol can contain thousands of experiences in this one symbol. But still, only through exploring that symbol and getting that, we can kind of get what happened and how it made the part feel. A third type of memory parts can share are kind of somatic states, which can be like sensed and felt. And this is where it is really important to make sure to not get overwhelmed by it, but to really experience what the part is sharing in a somatic way, which is often the case with very, very young parts. They don't really have words yet. They don't sometimes even have symbols yet, but they have these body sensations that they can send. And that they are trying to show their story through. One very helpful distinction around this can be between compassion and empathy. So in one way, this can be best explained that the need for compassion an exile might have is the need to be seen, to be validated, to be heard, which means I need to be open enough to be impacted in a way by the part, but I don't have to feel exactly as it's feeling. So I don't have to feel the depth of pain, but I can be with it. I can feel touched by that. I can feel sorry for it. I can get how hard that has been without having to take all of that charge in. Now, on the other hand, empathy can be more of a feeling felt for the exile. So sometimes it's really important for the exile to know you feel what it felt. Maybe you don't have to feel the whole charge, but you need to know what it felt like. And this is more of a need for empathy, that the part feels felt compared to feels understood and validated. But one kind of rule of thumb can be to try to keep some distance from the exile, to not blend constantly, but to offer that conscious blending when it is needed, but in general stay with the part rather than consciously blending with it, just as a distinction. And to continue the example with the witnessing, the first thing that happened as she was with that exile, as she was open towards that exile and invited the exile to share anything, was that rather than having a memory come up or a specific situation, it was that she suddenly started feeling very small. And a lot of times these feelings that will come up in clients and patients around exiles contain a lot of information around the part itself. So she started feeling very small. And as she stayed with that feeling, a memory came of being with her siblings. This memory was the part showing that to her. And those siblings were bullying her. They were pushing her to do things she didn't want to do. And she remembered that, and she realized, yeah, that was actually what happened so much around playing with her siblings, around trying to be involved. It was always her siblings wanting her, making her different, or trying her to go along with what they wanted. And she realized that was really painful. And the part then showed her, and this was a mixture of a embodied feeling, but also it just telling her of when that happened over and over and over again, it made this part feel so hopeless and worthless, because that was the only explanation this part had. It's if I don't get to play along, if I'm not important enough to be involved in the play in a way that is good for me, then I must be worthless, and then it's hopeless. Then I don't even have to try. That is how this exile, this little girl hanging her head, feels. And if witnessing has been done enough, when the client gets what the memory or what the part has experienced, when it gets how that was for the part, the next step is to move to what IFS calls the do-over, which is kind of making a helpful, different experience for this part. And one slightly cheeky way to put it could be to time travel to help the exile. Now, in the theory part, we talked about exiles being stuck in a memory or a symbol or an experience. They are just stuck in that place. And one way to help them out of there can be to internally time travel back and see how can we help that part. And the questions for that are often, what would the part have needed back then? And can you do that? Which can mean either as the self traveling back in time, kind of in imagination and doing that, or making sure whatever the part would have needed back then happens in the past. And through this, we can help the part have a new or corrective or nourishing experience that kind of helps as an alternative or sometimes as a change to the thing, to the memory the part has been so stuck in. And to continue the example, when exploring what the exile would have needed, the first thing she would have needed is to just be involved, to not always be outside of the play, or when she was in the play to be bullied and to be pushed around and to not matter. It's like she needed to be involved in such a way that she's a part of it. But what the part also shared is, for that to be the case, she would have needed somebody to protect her. Because the siblings were so much bigger, so much more powerful, that as things went wrong, she never could push against that, stand up for herself, so she would have needed somebody to protect her. And as the client connected with that and saw that in her inner eye, she would have needed somebody to protect that, the step in the do-over is, can you do that? Can you help the part with that? Can you help the part be involved and also protect her? And that's the invitation for the self, for her as the adult self, to kind of travel back there and make that happen. This is a weird mixture of imagination, but also it often feels so real. And for her, it was this, she closed her eyes and she realized, I can do that. And in front of her inner eye, she saw her younger part playing with her siblings, and she talked to them, and she made sure they realized what she needed, and she made sure they realized what it means to her for her to be involved. And in this scene, the siblings were like, oh. And when the siblings went along and were like, oh, and the young part realized, I am safe right now, something shifted in the body. And these shifts were quite powerful. So it took some time to be with that, to explore what happened then. And it was, for this part, it was like, that's what I always wanted. That's what I was always looking for. And when the part got what it was looking for, it was like something in her body relaxed. And this actually took a few minutes of just staying with that, allowing this to unfold and allowing this part to have this experience and allowing the impact of that experience in the body. And if the weight falls off from the part has a helpful new experience. Oftentimes, an additional step that can be so helpful is to retrieve the part. So when it has had a different experience here, maybe a different color there, we can ask it, does it want to stay there, or does it want to be brought to a different place? Because as we talked about, exiles are stuck in the past. They're stuck in these memory symbols, and we can bring them to the present, meaning here, bringing them to the place we live, the life we have now. We can bring them more to a place in our imagination now, or put them somewhere in our body where they're safe. But this means that not only this part has a new experience, it actually gets taken from that place it's been stuck for so long, sometimes decades. And that through that, it's a symbol to the part that something has changed. And it's as simple as asking the part, does it want to go somewhere? And then bringing it there. It's very intuitive for most people. To continue the example, after this change in experience, the next step was to ask the part if it wants to be retrieved from that situation, because this part that had been longing for this, being involved, being safe for so long, had been stuck in this situation. And sometimes it can be helpful to stay there because now the situation is differently, but this part was like, no, I've been here so long. I don't want to stay here. And when asked where it wants to go, the answer was, I want to be with you. I want to be with you where you live, where you are. So she took the part to her house, and she allowed the part to look around and see where do you want to be. And the part found a little corner in the room, a corner that to her, to the client, wasn't very, very meaningful, but to this part it was like, that's the place where I want to be. And took some time to be there, but it was like, once the part was there, it was like, yeah, that's where it belongs. It feels right. And when the part was there, the question was, does it need anything else? And the answer was yes. It needs to regularly connect with the adult. It needs connection. And can she do that? And her answer was like, absolutely. And it was like the place in the room, the corner that the part chose, got a different meaning through it being there. So the part got retrieved to her house. So these are already a lot of the steps, and they're actually very powerful. I think it's often easy to underestimate how profoundly transformative it can be to witness a part, to offer a part a new experience, to bring the part somewhere and to make sure it's not stuck in the same place. Those steps already have very deep, meaningful experiences for ourselves, but also for the parts. And in this graphic, it's basically gone from accessing, witnessing, over to the retrieving. And now we get to the step that many people are most curious about, which is the unburdening. I think within the courses and the sessions I'm giving, this is maybe the thing people are most curious about usually, which is, I want to help unburden my parts. I want to let go of burdens. And I get it, but at the same time, it's the last step of a whole series of very, very important elements. But I want to talk about it too. Basically, within the internal family system, it's been found that parts can let go of their burdens, transform their burdens. And this can actually be something that can be facilitated. Now, it doesn't make sense to connect with an exile, to have the first connection with and go, oh, so you want to let go of your burden? This is not the place where that step works. But when an exile has had a new experience and is in a better place, we can see, is there anything now that it has had that experience, that it is in this place, that it can let go of? Basically, a good question for that is, does the part now still carry anything from the past that it can let go of? And the experiences a lot of times parts do. Even though parts have been retrieved, even though parts have had very beautiful do-overs and experiences, they are still carrying beliefs or feelings or perspectives on the world that are painful, that are burdens from the past. And in this step, we can help parts through the unburdening process, through a little ritual, to let go of that. Because it's been found that when parts are offered and guided through, that they can really let go of a lot of these burdens they are still holding on to by giving it to one of the basic elements, by giving it to water, to fire, to earth, to the air or wind, or to a more spiritual source. And by doing that, by guiding parts through that ritual, it can really help them to kind of realize, oh, something's over, something's different. So in this unburdening process, which has its own magic to it, and which can be very simple and it can be very elaborate, parts can let go of some things in this symbolic realm, but it really makes a difference for people's bodies, for people's psyche, when something is let go in that way. To continue the example, once the part was retrieved to her house, the question was, does it still carry anything from the past? Any burden, anything that's left over from then? And the part was like, yes, there is still this feeling that I don't matter. And once the part said that, the client felt in her own body this sense of like, oof, there's absolutely no power in her body when she doesn't matter. And asking the part, are you ready to let go of that feeling of this, I don't matter? The part was like, yes, I don't need to carry this. So the part was asked to find that in her body, and it was really this sense of heaviness and weakness in her whole body. And when asked, what does she want to release this to? Is there an element she wants to release this to? There was immediately this giving it to the water. And the client in her imagination and together with the part found a beautiful lake to go to. And the part, the little girl, walked into the lake, and it was like the water took that feeling and it washed it out. And as the water was washing out that, what immediately happened was that where there was space, it was almost instantly filled with strength. There was this sense of strength that filled as the weakness and the lack of energy got washed out. It got filled with something else. And this actually took, again, a few minutes of just allowing that washing, filling. But when it did, the part felt completely different. And not only did the part not feel like it didn't matter anymore, there was also not this sense of weakness, but instead there was this supple and beautiful power and strength. And once you've gone through all of that, or she's gone through all of that, the last really important element of this step is to integrate. So not just to unburden, done, gone, but to really make sure that that has a chance to land. And for me, the integration has two qualities, or two elements. It's about integrating the qualities that have emerged, either that have emerged naturally or that the part has invited, but also integrating the protectors now that something has changed. And to me, that has a few elements. Number one, if something like this flowing worth comes, I think one very powerful way of staying with that is to see, now that that's there, how does that impact the system? What happens then? And really allow that to spread and kind of have its natural way of integrating into the system. The next thing that is kind of standard would be to see, did the protectors witness this? Did they watch this? Are they aware that this happened? And if they are aware, do they still need to do their job in the same way? Because now that the exile has changed, do they still need to do what is there, what they did until now? And really important, also after the session, in the next session, make sure to follow up. When something has changed like that with exiles, it really takes time to integrate into the system. So afterwards, integrating, making sure the protectors know, etc., but then also making sure the client or you know how to revisit this part so that it has a chance to really sink into the system. So all of those are steps of then integrating whatever happened into the system. To continue this example with integration, in this case, the most important element of integration was just allowing that stability, that strength, to have time. And actually what happened in her was that as that strength grew stronger, as the part was releasing the feeling of not mattering, the part grew stronger, she grew stronger, and there was a sense of stability and safety going with that. And it took almost 5 minutes of just staying with that, seeing what happens. How is this in the body? How is this for the part? To really allow that to spread, and it felt complete after that. And then the next step of integration was to check in with the hothead if it had witnessed this, and it was like, yes, I have witnessed this. I'm like, whoa! And it was actually really happy that this part was finally not worthless anymore, that it didn't feel like that. It was happy about that. And when asked whether it still sensed that it needed to do its role the same way, the response was no. If this part is more integrated and is more of an element or a part of life, being in the home, it can relax, it can get smaller. But I also wanted her to know that if she ever needs the hothead, it's there and it can stand up for herself. But what she literally saw was this part kind of growing smaller visually and being okay with not being as explosive, not being as much in the foreground, but that there's more space. And what happened over the next few weeks with this client was that actually the hothead was still a part of her. There were still moments where it rose and she had to stand up for herself, but it was way, way, way less. She still had the capacity to do it, but there was more of a sense of things are okay. I don't have to fight everything. I have a sense of stability. I can stand up for myself if I need to, but I can also trust. And this was really a huge step in her life and for her relationship. That's it for this video. Those are the steps for working with exiles. Those are the steps of the unburdening process. I hope this was helpful for you. This is the end of the second video series on IFS, or the internal family system as a therapeutic approach. If these videos were helpful for you, please feel free to share them. It really helps me out. And yeah, maybe see you in the next video series. Have a wonderful day.
You never know what's around the next corner.